interpreting and translating. It's part of communicating. It's communication. It's facilitating multilingual communication. Africa is a huge continent. It's host to over 1,500 languages. If you want Africa to cooperate, if you want the different countries of Africa to be able to cooperate, first of all, what do they need to do to be able to speak together? And this is what interpreters and translators are there for. My name is Paule Kekeh. I'm an interpreter at the European Commission in the Director General for Interpretation. In the olden times, the French-speaking Africa would cooperate with French-speaking Africa, the Portuguese-speaking Africa would cooperate with Portuguese-speaking Africa, and there was no real integration because remember, it's a huge continent. And little by little, efforts were made for Africa to cooperate, like really building synergies across the continent. So many different regional organizations came to life, political, but also in the business sector, the cultural sector, you name it. And they realized that how do we talk to one another? And there were very few qualified interpreters and translators in Africa. And especially for this particular skill that conference interpreting is, very few qualified people. Why? Because there were no training structure, or let me correct myself, there was one training structure from in Cameroon that has been training interpreters for 40 years, but one for the whole of Africa, that wasn't much. Formerly, interpreters used to go and get training in the West. It wasn't, not everybody could afford it because it was expensive. And recently with the visa policies, with the expensive studies, so not so many people could access that kind of training. And international organizations, regional organizations active in Africa were finding it really difficult to find interpreters for their meetings. And because of that, a gray and black market of interpreters and translators, self-made professionals had emerged. And their services were maybe not optimal. So the heads of language services, they meet every year in an organization or a meeting called YamLab. And in 2008, I think they decided to try and do something to solve that problem of poor quality interpreting and translation services. So they did a stock-taking exercise in Africa to see where the training structures were, and they found one that was up to the mark. And they thought, okay, if we want to solve the problem, we have to create training structures in Africa so as to train homegrown translators and interpreters to service the African market. Homegrown is also very important because they used to import interpreters from the West, but as an interpreter you convey a message, but it's not only words. You convey a culture, you convey a history, your knowledge of the economic realities, political realities, and you can best do that when you're homegrown, when it's your home, your continent, and you're more aware of the realities that exist on that continent. PAMCIT is the acronym for the Pan-African Masters Consortium in Interpretation and Translation. It is a network of excellence of universities who offer masters in translation and conference interpreting. It's a Pan-African network with centers based all across Africa, and it's an initiative that's funded by the European Union via the Pan-African program, and with a lot of international stakeholders, United Nations Office at Nairobi, the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, Instituto Camões, the African Development Bank, the ACP Secretariat. So this is what PAMCIT is in short.